President Biden calling on Congress to send him the border bill during the State of the Union Thursday as migrants continue to stream across the southern border. Joining us now for more, former acting DHS Secretary and Fox News contributor Tom Homan. Tom, thanks for being here. I just spent the week in Eagle Pass, and I want to talk about it, and I want to talk about a convergence that I see between the border crisis and violent crime. Laken Riley, the list is long. But first, I want to have you to respond to this tragic helicopter crash.
Look, it's a tragedy, right? And throughout my career, I've been to too many Border Patrol funerals, too many ICE funerals. But I want to take this opportunity to let people know the men and women of the Border Patrol, they're patriots. They're the finest of the finest, down there putting their lives on the line. And lately I've been seeing the videos of people attacking the Border Patrol, that they're part of the problem, they're human traffickers, they're smuggling. You know what? That's a bunch of crap. These men and women are putting their lives on the line for this country every day. Even though they're doing a job they don't want to do because they don't have, the morale's in the toilet, they don't believe in the mission of this current administration. These men and women put it on the line every day. So for the men and women of the Border Patrol, God bless them, and I hope every American understands the difficult job they have.
And what was happening, just because I've spent so much time in this area, people not familiar with it, La Grula, Rio Grande City, this is an area that is very often frequented by the drug smugglers, and it's a very remote area of Texas. And so what was happening was the National Guard chopper, this Lakota helicopter, had a Border Patrol member on board to help them find the area, to navigate the terrain. How important of a part of the mission is that?
It's extremely important, because that area is where a lot of gotaways come through, right? And that's where a lot of the drugs come through, because there's not a lot of resources there. Boots on the ground, it's a big area. The best way to cover is by air. So the National Guard, they certainly know they can operate the helicopter, but the Border Patrol agent knows the lay of the land. So they work together very closely. And because of that working relationship, Border Patrol sees enough fentanyl in the last 2 years to kill every American in this country. So it's a great relationship. It's very positive. What happened yesterday is a tragedy.
Let's respond to what you heard from President Biden in the State of the Union.
You know, I left first of all, he didn't talk about the fentanyl overdoses caused by this border. He didn't talk about the 1,700 dead illegal aliens that crossed this border. He didn't talk about no suspected terrorists crossing the border. He swept it all under the rug, like I knew he would. But when I left that State of the Union address, and I was driving home that night, I was just disgusted that there's hundreds of people in that building that are going to stand up and applaud something they know is not true. And it's just, I can't believe there's not an ounce of integrity left in that building anymore, that you're going to stand and applaud a man for saying things that everybody in that room knows not true. I wish you would address the border. The border is the biggest national security failure this country has. And as the commander-in-chief at the State of the Union, talking about national security should be front and center.
Is there a disconnect between the fact that we saw in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, every state we've now covered political races, immigration is among or not the top issue, but yet President Biden waited 40 minutes into his speech to bring it up?
Then what he did, he talks about, you know, passing a bill that passed through the Senate, which is the terrible bill. It's not going to work. It's not going to stop the catch and release. It's not going to, it does anything, nothing about the 450,000 children across the border, and 1,000 more can cross the border. If he wants to talk about securing the border, he has H.R. 2 passed the House. The Senate won't even talk about. H.R. 2 will secure the border. Why? Because a lot of his Trump's policies, we proved those policies work.
We know that among the pull and push factors, the greatest pull factor is the open border policies, or more specifically put, the catch and release policies. When I was there on Thursday, the day of the State of the Union, I actually was filming when my cameraman, Ed Solis, who speaks Spanish, and I saw this individual with the Biden-Harris t-shirt. Here is a little bit of what he told us.
Es el presidente y la vicepresidenta de los Estados Unidos.
Ah, pero entonces ya lo traigo aquí para que me dejen entrar.
What's that tell you?
Look, Biden ran on open borders. I got to give him credit. He kept his promise. He opened the border. And it's really not a laughing matter when we have 114,000 dead Americans from fentanyl overdoses because it's flown across that open border. Mm-hmm. We got 1,700 dead migrants have died crossing the border. We got 340 known people off the terrorist watch list coming across the border. And most importantly, Griff, 1.9 million gotaways. We don't know who they are, where they came from, why they're here. But no one's going to convince me they didn't come from a country sponsored terror, at least some of them. Something's coming, and it's not a laughing matter, and this administration needs to take the border seriously.
So people hear that, Tom, and sometimes they think, is it a terrorist? When I was reporting this past week, we had a Colombian terrorist hit the screening list a week before President Trump got to Eagle Pass. But now we're looking at the two brothers, the one, the accused murderer of Laken Riley, and his brother, Diego Ibarra, who was in court this week, both suspected of being members of Venezuela's most dangerous gang, Tren de Aragua. And there's a concern that they will try and set up a crime syndicate in the U.S., much like MS-13. I've only got like 15 seconds. Are you concerned that we're going to see Venezuela bring something new to this country?
Absolutely. President Trump was not wrong when he said a lot of bad people come across that border. Not all of them are public safety threats, but many of them are, and this is evidence of it.
Tom Homan, thank you for being here in studio. We'll see where this goes.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.